Good morning. We, the citizens of a country, always expect much better things from the governments. And the governments, more often than not, try to blind us with a show, with a pomp, and with a glitter. It's like an aeroplane trying to cheat a missile by flick, throw the tinsel, and the people would not be aware whether the government is performing its duty or not. And devoid of those frills, devoid of the hue, devoid of the noise that they create, let's find out whether any government, and by that I mean any responsible government, is performing its duty. But what are the basic duties of a government? Any responsible government has to protect, provide, and invest in its people. That's the basics. And the governments which don't do that are failing in their job. There was a political scientist, Hobbes, and he wrote a book, Leviathan, in which he writes that we live in a state of insecurity, unrelenting insecurity, and that insecurity is because of state of law and order within the country and fear of danger from the outside foes. The horror of little or no government to provide the functions on a global display today. Today we can see the horrors where the governments are failing, and that is why so many fragile states are there, and they're essentially ungoverned regions. And because of that, now this is very important, because the governments have failed to provide proper security, either from within or from without, the people are happier to live under the regimes like that of Taliban and ISIS. They don't want to live in a perpetual civil war. They don't want to know or live in a state of suspended life and death. So it's better to have a security and a safety of a government which is incapable, which is fundamental, which is in fact just a terror group or a gang, but still it provides some sense of security. Very fragile, very incomprehensible, but the people have a sense that, okay, somebody is there to protect them. The idea of the government as a protector requires taxes to fund, train and equip an army and a police force, to build courts and justices. And regarding the foreign threat, the government is supposed to fight as well as create conditions that the fights don't take place. Now, the minimal view of the government was displayed when USA started and took its birth. In those days, the American Republic was comprised of only three things: the President, Congress, Supreme Court, and there were only three major departments. No, unlike the departments now, and they were Department of Treasury, War, Justice, that's it. And State, of course, State and Justice. Now, the second thing, apart from protection, is that the government has to be a provider. It's a provider of goods and services that individuals cannot provide for themselves. Now, this is very crucial. Ordinarily, people are supposed to provide for their capabilities, for their needs themselves. But then there are situations when they cannot provide for themselves. What those situations are, we'll see. And government collectively becomes the medium to provide the services and the public goods that benefit everyone. And there's no collective compulsion. The basic infrastructure of human connectivity falls into this category. And that is means to travel, infrastructure, bridges, ports, roads, increasing means of virtual travel like broadband, internet, and all this infrastructure can initially be provided by a band of entrepreneurs, but then they will charge the citizens. So the government might directly or indirectly provide, but the services are a must. So apart from protecting, the second duty of the responsibility is to provide. Now, more extensive government has provided is social welfare. And social welfare is not a basic function. Now, let's be very clear. But social welfare has two aspects. In one aspect is a social function where the people are really in need of that. The old age, the vulnerable conditions of the youth, disability and unemployment, they are situations beyond the control of a human being. And for those situations which are beyond the control of a human being, is the responsibility of the government to provide them. But to provide them welfare because they don't want to work or pose that they are incapable is not the responsibility of the government. And that's why they say that the welfare state ultimately breeds gangs, prostitution, and violence. So, the provision of the goods and services has to be very clear. The basic needs have to be provided. And then for the really needy, for the really deserving, social welfare has to be provided. So these are the responsibilities, as we said, to provide and to protect. But is that sufficient? No. Most important is that the government has to ensure that the society or the country is able to sustain itself. And then they have got to invest in the people. This celebration of human capacity is a welcome step because it's an antidote to widespread pessimism and the capacity of the government to meet the current national needs, environmental challenges, demographic challenges, security is very important. And investment of the people means education. Investment in the people means health care. That is extremely important, and that's where most of the governments fail. Now, when the government of one country welcomes hundreds and thousands of the refugees before providing sufficiently for its own citizens, it might win a lot of approbation and goodwill, but it is not performing its job. You have got to first provide your citizens with the basic needs. For example, in Canada, the health services are good, excellent, I would say rather. But then there are still some sectors where they are not sufficient, especially the First Nations. They are suffering badly. They are suffering badly from alcoholism. And the country as a whole is suffering badly from opioid addiction. So we haven't cared to look after them, but we have invited refugees and illegal immigrants. And we pamper them, give them more facilities than the citizens get. That is wrong. So, as I said, we have got to ensure that the people are invested. Now, when we talk of the people's investment, the first thing is invest in the babies, children. They are the hope of tomorrow. The first 5 years of a child are most essential for the brain development. And here is when the children will learn and process what they learn for the rest of their lives. And the child care facilities, you remember in one day I was talking, are minimal in this country. We are nowhere among the real good countries providing effective, affordable child care. The OECD report was very clear that we failed. So the investment in the people in the beginning is not appropriate. Second is the entire infrastructure from the pregnancy, prenatal, to the child's, to the parenting classes, home visits, they are lacking. And they are required for investing in the people. Then there are meaningful opportunities for continuing education. The education at the post-secondary level, for example, in Canada, extremely expensive and unaffordable. And if you really do it, you are burdened by the student loan. Why should the loans be there? Shouldn't it be the government's responsibility to ensure the children, who are the hope of the tomorrow and who are the citizens of tomorrow, are educated as per their needs? I'm not saying give everybody free education. But even if you give them, there's nothing wrong with that. If we can afford to spend billions on useless projects, we can definitely afford to spend millions on investing in the people. So that is extremely important. Then, teenagers. We have got to protect them from gangs and the drugs and the prostitution. Investment on education falls on barren ground if the brains are not capable of receiving and absorbing it. So meaningful opportunities for continuing education are a must, and that is lacking in most of the countries. You see, if you look what the futurists and the business consultants say, the power of the pull is most important. Successful projects no longer design a product according to the aesthetic. They push it to the customer. So the customer has to be educated enough to know finally what is there. And then, most important, government has to find investors. I agree. The government may not have sufficient money, but it's a responsibility to go in for the private-public partnerships. And that investment is for anti-scale. As the need expands, the government investment falls and the private investment takes over. The normal venture capital approach to the investment is to invest, to expect 9 ventures to fail and 1 that takes up should be scaled up and bring all the profits. However, the government cannot follow this. The government has to follow the other way around, where all the projects pass, though with a minimum profitability. The government is not a venture capitalist. The investment here is different. So they have got to change the complete model. Now what is happening is, governments often try to copy the venture capitalist, the businessman, to reach benefits. Government is not in business of business. It's in business of protecting, providing, and investing in the people. A government that believes that the talent and potential of citizens is important and devotes a large portion of tax revenues on investing in its citizens to help them reach their potential is an attractive vision. But how many governments are doing it? If I look at the reports of human index, happiness index, 4, 5, that's all. If the first 10 figures they gave, they are not actually the real figures. The real figures are only first 4 or 5. And since they have to give the 10, they add them on. If you look at any result, the top 10, you will see the first 4 or 5, the difference might be marginal, 0.2%, 0.3%, 0.4%. And from 5 downwards, the difference is 7%, 10%, 20%, even up to 80%. So that's not what the 5 are. So in a world of 200 countries, if 4 or 5 countries are able to provide these basic services, what about the others? The government, a responsible government, must recognize that the citizens would ultimately wake up. You can fool some of the people some of the time, all the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. the government has got to recognize and address the changing needs of society over their lifetime and see that the public goods created by the sum deliberately meets all the parts. So the essential government has to ensure that they protect the people from inside, no riots, crime and order is okay. They have got to protect it from the foreign countries, the depredation of the aggressors. They have got to give them fulfill their basic needs and all other needs, and most importantly, invest in the people. The countries which have a lot of GDP, I pity them. You know, there was an old poem which we used to read. Ill fares the land to hastening ills a prey, where wealth accumulates and men decay. And that is what is happening in North America. Wealth is accumulating, men are decaying. Let the governments grow up. Let the governments grow up and realize the potential of what they can do and deliver the services. First, deliver the three basic services: provide, protect, invest, or the other way around: protect, provide, and invest. And then we'll talk of the frills. Till that, you are just these governments who don't do these three things, are abdicating their responsibility and are not worth being where they are. Thank you.